Hello, I'm Russ Ost. Many of you already know me, but I just wanted to thank, first of all, Hibernia for letting me have this privilege and honor to talk about my father, Rusty Ost, was a very special father in my eyes, and also, I guess, in a lot of my family's eyes. So I just want to spend a few minutes and talk about how he influenced me. In my earlier years, being part of the baby boomers, most of us had our father home. We had a Christian family. Both my mother and father were Christians. My father made sure that we were at church every Sunday, and he also made sure that his kids were all involved in the children's ministry of the particular church we were in. He was very present in our lives, which is very important these days. He worked close by, so he was always home usually for supper. He gave us some focal points in our earlier years by getting us into church and helping us start learning the Bible, learning Bible verses and all. He believed, matter of fact, I think he spent a lot of his time when he did Bible studies in Hebrews, particularly chapter 12, where it talked about, the Lord disciplined those that he loved. So I can tell you that my dad must have really loved me a lot, because I did receive quite a bit of discipline growing up. But, because of that, my sisters and I grew up with a healthy fear or respect for my dad. We grew up kind of knowing right from wrong. And so in hindsight, I was really appreciative that we did have the discipline we had back then. Around 15 years old, I began to observe the way my dad was actually living his life. And one thing that really caught my eye is that every morning he would start his day in the Word. He had his Bible out there, and he loved to use the daily bread as his devotion. After he did his devotion, and if anybody from the family was at home, he'd kind of take the Bible and kind of slide it over towards you and say, "You ought to read this. This is pretty good. And maybe you ought to read this. Now while you have a minute." And as a teenage boy, when he would do that to me, and I said, "Oh, I'll get to it later, Dad. I've got to get to school, or I got to get to practice. I had to do something." So I kind of put it off, but I could see it was very impactful on him, and then later in my life, it was very impactful to know what it was like to start your day being in the Bible every day. As I grew up and got into my later teenage years, I got to be thinking I knew everything. And of course, Dad taught me quickly that I didn't know everything, but we kind of drifted apart a little bit until actually almost the day I left when I was around 21 years old, going to college. The switch just kind of flipped, and we became kind of best friends. He kept up with me while I was in college and after I graduated in my early career. But unfortunately, I found a way to get tempted with the worldly temptations while I was in college and some in my early career, which led to a lot of things I was very disappointed in. I didn't want to share with my folks because I knew better, but yet I fell to those temptations. I kind of kept it a secret, which until it kind of really culminated to a failed marriage in my late 20s. That was the hardest thing for me. That was a heavy burden for me because it was the first failed marriage in my family on either side of the family, and it was something that I just couldn't face. My parents about. They knew that it had failed, but I just couldn't talk to him about it, and it was just a heavy burden of everything I had done, knowing what I was taught was right and wrong. So I was at some crossroads in 1983. It was the worst year of my life, and I actually carried a 50-cent piece in my pocket up until about 10 years ago. That was a 1983 Kennedy $50. And I just kept it as a kind of like a fidget coin, but it reminded me of the bad times in my life that I never wanted to see again. Fortunately, the Lord saw that I needed some help to get on the straight and narrow, so He sent a person that I worked with in Montgomery, Alabama. She came into my office one day and told me about a Sunday school class that was meeting in Montgomery. And it was amazing how I was received by the church. It was just a big changing point in my life. And that was in December of 1983. And so Christmas came, I got to see my family some, and right after Christmas, when I got home and they got back home from where we were for the Christmas family get-together, I called them and told them I joined that church, that it was, I wanted them to come down as soon as they could to meet my new church family. And I finally shared some of the things that had gone on, including what was going on and that caused my marriage to fail. And I got some words of encouragement from my father that really helped me relieve the burden on my shoulders, because I was just so embarrassed from a family perspective that, I had the first failed marriage in our families. But to hear him say, he used to call me Buster. That was his nickname for me. And he told me, he said, Buster, your mother and I had our problems at times, but we'd always work them out. He said, I can only imagine what you're going through, but, we love you and support you. I really don't know how much that meant to me, especially, I'm sorry, but this is so close to me. But about 10 days later, after that call, I got another call while I was in the office, working, and I was told that I needed to call home. This was January 17th of 1984. They said, you need to really call. Said, there's been an accident. You need to talk to your family. So I called and found out that on that day, about 7:40 in the morning, Dad was making an approach to Greenville, South Carolina's airport, and his plane went down, and it was reported there were 4 fatalities. It was including my dad. Just getting that word, it was a shock, because I just couldn't believe it, because my father was such a strong Christian, and why at age 58 he had to go, especially when he was in good health. But just floods of thoughts came through. So I contacted my church and that I had just joined, the week before, and I just started getting packed up to go for a 3.5-hour drive up to Rome, Georgia, where my folks lived, and just playing everything over and over what I heard. Could it be a mistake? Could it have been somebody else's playing? Everything was playing in my mind. But the one thing that I knew that I had to do, I was the only son of my family, and I knew it was going to be hard for my 2 sisters and my mom, especially my younger sister and my mom, because my dad was still part of their everyday life, and it was just plucked away, in a moment. But I knew that we would all be hurting, but I had to be strong for the family. So I finally finished that drive and walked into the house. And the first thing I realized, I looked over into the living room and I saw my dad's Bible open and his daily bread. And so I kind of walked over there and looked at it. I noticed that the daily bread was open to January 17th of that year. And the Bible was open to Colossians 3, which the focal verses for his devotion that day, the verses were 1 through 4. If then you've been raised up in Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden in Christ, in God. When Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you will also be revealed with him in glory. I just wanted to share that my dad was a faithful Christian. I could see it in the way he lived his life, the way he, not only with me, but I spent about 2.5 hours shaking hands when we had his visitation, and you wouldn't believe the stories I heard that I never knew about my father. And I found out that 2 of my closest friends were led to Christ by my dad. And I learned, that my father was very active with the elderly in our church. That, especially for the families that were there with no other family members in the city, he would go in and talk to them, visit, and if there's anything that needed to be fixed mechanically, he would do that for them. So I had, things like that just really set me a way to think about the way I wanted to live my life as a father and as a person. As I have a summary for fathers of today that I'd like to share, and it kind of came to me after listening to a song by Mercy Me. It's called Dear Younger Me, and I'd highly recommend you listen to that, but it's about writing a letter to yourself now that you know a lot about life, what you would do differently. And the first thing I'd say, please be present in the daily life of your family. I mean, I got a lot of the things that I love from my dad. Lead your family in their Christian walk. Lead by example, just like my dad did. At the appropriate time, share your life's experiences before it's too late. Because my dad died at 58, there were a lot of things I didn't know about him that I found out in later years. So, like, for instance, he was a P-51 fighter pilot in World War II, which I knew there were P-51 pictures everywhere, but we never got to talk about his experience there. The next thing I'd say, don't be afraid to discipline your children. They need to know what is right and wrong, especially in the present worldly environment we live in today. And finally, remember Colossians 3:2. If you remember that, and if you set your eyes on things above, everything will fall into place, for you and your family.